It wasn't the news many were looking forward to seeing, but no suspension for Sam Bennett. We'll discuss how that potentially impacts what happens in game two and whether or not Anthony Stolarz will play a factor. That and more here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, your daily things for all things Leafs. I'm your host, David Morassutti, and joining me today, with Mike still not available, is our reoccurring. He was good for game one. We got to keep it going for game two. He's been around for quite a bit this season for us. It is our good friend, candidate Frank Stanisci. Frank, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me on, and I enjoy being here. And it's been an interesting playoff series thus far.
It has, and it comes with quite a bit of talk and chatter after a 5-4 victory in game one. We are back again for game two tonight at 7 o'clock at Scotiabank Arena. Leafs will try to take a 2-0 series lead over the Florida Panthers, but as usually it does happen quite a bit in the playoffs, sometimes the talk gets taken off the ice. Both things that happen on the ice, but a lot of the talk goes through the other things that happened in game one. Obviously, the victory, big for the Leafs to get that first win, but it was the Anthony Stolarz injury that led to a Sam Bennett no call on the ice. And as the NHL didn't even say, but everybody else is saying, the NHL says no dice on any supplemental discipline for Sam Bennett. Frank, your reaction when you found out the news?
I wasn't surprised. He's the new Brad Marchand. If you remember, there was quite a good run there where Marchand did a lot of stuff and didn't get any kind of suspension, any kind of fine. They found reasons. Well, they didn't even find reasons. I know it's different today. At least before, they used to say, they changed it a little bit. They used to say, well, it was a hockey play, so we're not going to suspend him. They don't even do that anymore. Now they don't even address, the reasoning for not suspending.
I think that's the big one there. It's not that they didn't suspend Sam Bennett. There wasn't even this is why no supplemental discipline was happening. Because we know that they were looking into it because it was reported by a lot of people that there was there was a look at all the factors. Now, some people have wondered, and I did hear just browsing around the good old X Machine website, whatever you want to call it. A lot of people seem to think that maybe the NHL felt that it wasn't enough to warrant discipline what Bennett did. Did they take into account the slap shot that went off of Stolarz early in the game? And I got an issue with this whole thing. We brought it up last night that there's a former wrestler, funny enough, who's now got his PhD and is basically become the concussion expert when it comes to figuring out, educating. Let's say educating and be informing people on concussion safety. Chris Nowinski, that is, by the way. If you want to go and follow him on X, you can do that at Chris Nowinski1. And he was like right on top of the whole thing. And he said, look, the big one here, he called the shake. He called when you get hit in the face, when you get hit in the head, there's kind of like that shake. Now, obviously, for the NHL, they didn't deem that worthy of him being taken out of the game for a look. And it wasn't until Stolarz, had that unfortunate vomit incident along the bench there that he got pulled. So two things I wonder about this whole situation. One being, it wasn't enough for a suspension, but yet this whole situation, the NHL, in my opinion, didn't really think it kind of screamed a little weird that obviously not they didn't think it was worth supplement this one, and it wasn't even enough the whole play to take Stolarz out, because even after he got knocked, he didn't get pulled right away. So maybe the NHL just felt, hey, we didn't think it was enough worthy of it, but I find that tough to believe when you see how many people are discussing the what they saw after the play.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about this, and here's the problem that I have with the National Hockey League. It causes a lot of red flags for the way, for there to be punishment and for it to be consistent, there needs to be some transparency, in my opinion. Here's the lack of transparency in the National Hockey League. The league doesn't tell you why it isn't a penalty. Therefore, there's no clear understanding of that specific situation and why it fits as not suspendable. The officials are nowhere to be seen as far as being made accountable for why they would have missed a penalty. Regardless of whether he gets suspended or not, he did interfere with the goaltender in the crease. You're not allowed to hit the goaltender in the crease. That's his territory. So my point is, if the referees aren't accountable and the league isn't accountable, who should be surprised that there's confusion with the penalties? Because there's no guideline. There's no verbal guideline put out there for how they determine what a penalty is. They take out the rule book, but the rule book, as you know, is not specific. So you have to take out the part of the rule book you want to understand. So I think you've talked to me about this, and you've mentioned to me how the NBA has a different way to look at officials. Officials are made more accountable. They're reviewed after every game. If there's a questionable call at the end of the game, you'll be aware. The league makes everybody aware. We recognize this referee made this mistake at this time. Therefore, we're saying it ain't going to happen again. And why is that important? Because if you don't identify the mistakes that the officials make, they repeat them. That's just human nature. That's just the way life works. That's my biggest beef with this. I never believed that there was going to be a suspension. I looked at the player, and the one thing the National Hockey League historically has done, they judge players differently depending on what team they play and who they are. Florida gets away with a lot of stuff, and we saw Florida and Tampa Bay have a series that was there were a lot of suspensions. It was a terribly dirty series. Now, here's my point. That's not Tampa's game. It's Florida's game. So, in essence, the league is promoting Florida's way of playing when they play because they're not giving penalties accordingly. So, in my opinion, to end my little rant, the Leafs are going to have to play the way their coach is telling them. Between the whistles, be tough, be diligent, play hard. After the whistle, stop. Don't do anything. Because they're not going to win. Because if they do that, the Leafs do that, they'll be entering into a way Florida likes to play, which is, in my opinion, the mistake that Tampa made that Toronto now is learning from.
Yeah. One thing, you and I had a conversation earlier in the day about this, and I brought up Sam Bennett's comments. He said it was just a bump. There's no forceful action. The last thing I'm thinking about is trying to elbow him in the head. And he also likes to bring out that him and Stolarz are good friends, and why would he ever want to injure a good friend? But then he goes to say, I play the game hard, and I think it needs to be played hard in the playoffs. Sometimes that's what it takes to win. When guys are injured, of course, I feel bad. That's never my intent. At the same time, hockey's a physical game. So in a way, he somewhat feels bad, but he's also like, it's playoffs.
And there's a line, and he hugs it, and he straddles it.
Exactly.
He admitted that.
I'll give him this. Why Florida gets away with it is they know how to make it not so obvious, right? Like, look at what happened. We
you don't think it has anything to do with Campbell and his son being a part of the Florida?
No, not even. I'm not even going there anymore because I know that it's been brought up in a lot of chats, and I get that. But for me, it's you look at what Tkachuk was trying to do to Marner after the game. Subtle. It was subtle because it didn't look like a big thing, but we knew what Tkachuk was trying to do. So we'll get into kind of the Leafs' response and how things need to be kind of addressed going into game 2. But on the other side, let's go into the Leaf side of everything, and that is Anthony Stolarz. What's going on with him? Are we going to see him in the net for game 2? That remains a big question mark. So we'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. If you're looking for a snack, there's no better snack to get than Wonderful Pistachios. It's because it's both delicious and nutritious. So crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. It is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keeping you feeling fuller longer. I'm a big fan of the no shell option because I can bring it to my desk here, do some work, and make sure I'm not getting the mess that comes with that great snack. Also, they have such great flavors. You can go and get yourself unsalted. If you're someone that doesn't like the salt, you can get unsalted. If you want just a little bit of salt, they also have lightly salted. But they also have some very creative flavors if you want to give yourself just a little bit of edge with that protein snack. So get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. The Locked On Leafs podcast continues here. David Morassutti, and it is Frank Stanisci joining us today with Mike. He's still unavailable for us. I expect him to be back by the end of, hopefully at the end of game 2. So we're getting ourselves ready for game 3. So Frank, thank you very much for dropping. I know you're always itching to talk Leafs, even if it's not on the podcast format. So this is always just an easy plug and play option here for me. So obviously now the big question going into game 2 is, will he or won't he? Will Anthony Stolarz be in goal, or will he be not starting? And Craig Berube did not give us a definitive yet, basically saying he's doing well. Was at the facility and doing well. Well, so Craig, is he available to play? We'll see. Don't know that yet. Did he suffer concussion? Don't know that either. And then they were kind of talking. This is the thing. Craig Berube, you can ask him all the questions he wants. He ain't giving you jack. He's not opening up. But Frank, I got to ask you, given everything that we saw from that game, should we be seeing Anthony Stolarz in the net for game 2?
Well, to be honest, David, the fact that we're not talking about him having been on the ice tells me he's not going to be it.
So that's the other thing too, is it didn't look like the Leafs had it. It was just an availability. Doesn't look like there was actually a practice for the Leafs today. But I guarantee if there was a practice, no way Anthony Stolarz was going to be on the ice. The guy was in the hospital the night before. They're not putting him out on the ice for a practice. I think this is one of those things where Berube doesn't want to play any cards. Again, we're not expecting, I think the majority of us would kind of lean towards him not playing in game 2. If he makes it for game 2, I would be very surprised. And also maybe a little worried because that was a tough knock he took. Now, sometimes people react to things differently. I know a lot. I don't want to sound insensitive to people, but your concussion history what you went through doesn't necessarily translate to what Anthony Stolarz went through. I appreciate people who've been through concussions. I know a few people around me that have been through concussions. And one thing I can tell you, you can't compare. You cannot compare. It's tough. I know a lot of people play hockey and they say, "Oh, I got my lights, the lights knocked out of me. I've had my bell rung. That's always a big one." But because we haven't heard from Anthony Stolarz, because we don't know what, other than the fact that he vomited, which pretty, you can pretty much deduce that there was something going on there, whether it was concussion-like symptoms, neck trauma, or something that caused him to vomit. It was enough to say, I can't continue in this game. And it makes me believe that even if he's feeling better, because he is feeling better according to Craig Berube, is he feeling better enough to handle another game of high intensity, what is going to be a very high intense game from the Panthers in game 2, Frank?
I don't think he'll be in there. I suspect he won't be. And I'll tell you, if he ends up in there, all this riled up emotion that Leaf fans have and whomever thinks that what Bennett did was so bad is going to be kind of abbreviated, if you know what I'm saying. So people will be able to say, if he comes in, then people are going to say, well, maybe what Bennett did wasn't so bad, which would be fair. That would be a fair thing. But I really believe that he was hurt badly, and I believe he won't play in this next game. The closest he's going to come to the ice, he might be on the bench and then maybe brought in an emergency. But I doubt that, because the decision by the Leaf organization has to be, who do they want on the bench in case things don't work out with Woll. The temptation to have at least him there might be there because Hildeby doesn't have the kind of experience that you'd want to have in the playoffs, right? So I think that's the temptation. I don't think the temptation is to play him. I think the temptation is to put him as the backup.
Yeah, I mean, have him as an option. I think, you know what, you also got to make sure that I'm sure now my belief or my thinking is you've got Joseph Woll ready and going as if he's the guy for game 2. You have to make sure that he's mentally ready to step into the net there because he did very good when he got into the game. Third period, probably would have expected just a little bit, a little tighter, little,
no warm up.
I get that, but like third period, I felt like he kind of lost it a little bit there. He could have been a little better in that third period, but like the second period, he was pretty solid, right? I think maybe that was a bit of the adrenaline rush there of saying, okay, I got to be ready. I got to keep us in this game. And then the third period, Florida turned flip the switch a bit there. We'll get to that on the next segment, kind of the response for game 2. But I think it's important for the team to recognize that Joseph Woll hasn't played. He hasn't started since the end of the regular season, which was like we're talking a fair amount of time here. So you got to give him that opportunity to make sure that he's ready. And I did. Mike and I talked about this. I messaged Mike and I'm like, oh, you wanted your Joseph Woll appearance. You got it. It happened. Not how we expected it to happen, but we did say that this is a situation he has been in before.
Absolutely. Yes.
But here's the thing. And I think one thing that people need to understand, as good as Joseph Woll has been in his career, teams eventually start to figure a goalie out once they get to see him a bit more. Right. But I still think, Joseph Woll, you can't knock the history that he has, the experience he's had in the playoffs. He has been in a situation like this before.
Yeah.
And I think
he was the goaltender. He was
right?
brought in this kind of situation.
Even it doesn't matter if you're the backup, the 1A, the 1B, you got to be ready for these situations. So we'll see how that kind of impacts. We won't know obviously until morning skate what's happening. If Anthony Stolarz is not on the ice for morning skate, I would say the likelihood of him starting is pretty much zero. it would have the Leafs would not be playing any sort of games with the Panthers by holding them back or doing anything.
It's not just games with the Panthers, David. It's making it possible for Joseph Woll, to be ready.
Yeah,
he has a right to know that morning that he's going to play, and then he can go through the regimen that he needs to go through.
Exactly.
That he's developed and that his goalie coach has developed, so that they can have him start at the best, the best way he can.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of the one thing I'm sure will be the biggest talking point when the Leafs hit the ice for morning skate. I'm sure Craig Berube likely will name the starter to be Joseph Woll, but we'll keep an eye on. You'll be take a look at our Instagram if you want to know. I'll likely post once we hear it from right from the coach, if he does give us that definitive starter for game 2. There is a lot that we have to look forward to in game 2. How do the Leafs make sure that it is a 2-0 series lead? And what are some of the things other than, the play on the ice that we're going to look out for? What's the mentality that this team needs to have going into game 2? We'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
An award-winning mattress can change your life. I speak from experience. It happened to me. After years of uncomfortable sleeps, I recently switched to Bear Mattress, and the results were instant. Bear Mattress is designed with a focus on recovery, cooling, and pressure relief to upgrade your sleep and improve your overall quality of life. I used to deal with night sweats, but Bear's best-in-class cooling ensures optimal temperature regulation, which prevents overheating and helps me stay comfortable all night long. Bear offers a wide variety of mattresses, but to get the right one for you, take their sleep quiz that matches you to your perfect mattress based on body type and sleep preferences. Go to bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout to get 40% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's bearmattress.com. Use my promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get 40% off site-wide. Bearmattress.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL.
We are back here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. David Morassutti. Joining me is candidate Frank Stanisci, and we got a game to play. It is game 2 between the Leafs and the Panthers. The Leafs had a 4-1 lead, won the game 5-4. Probably the third period is not how Craig Berube wanted to draw it up. There's obviously a lot going on between the Stolarz injury, Woll coming into the game, and the Panthers finally decided to play a bit more of their game in that third period. So, Frank, the real question here is, which version of the Leafs should we expect? The ones that dominated for the first 40 minutes, or the ones that looked a bit timid in that third period?
I'm going with the team that we saw start the game, and I'm looking forward to them starting the way they did in that first game. The difference is going to be, David, how different will Florida's game be at the beginning? So I don't expect anything different from Toronto. The question is, what's Florida going to put up against that? So, we saw them play really well after the Stolarz removal. That was a time I think the Leafs, that they were a little distracted, and so I wouldn't put too much stock into how well Florida played in the back half of the game. The same way I wouldn't put too much stock in how badly they played at the beginning game. I think we're going to see a more steady, even-keeled game as long as there's no incident that is distracting that happens. We're going to see a very good Florida team and a Toronto team that needs to come out of the corners with the puck. We talked about Florida being the team that are the puck hunters. In yesterday's game early, the Leafs were the puck hunters. So that's going to be the trenches, like in football. David, this is going to be fought in the trenches.
It's definitely going to be fought in the trenches. And I think that's what impressed me the most about the Leafs first period and the second period is not only were they focused on making sure that they were getting the lead, but they were also making sure that Florida was not going to have the edge in the physical play, right? The Leafs were dishing out their hits. Now I'm trying to see if I can find.
They only hit half as many times as Florida did.
Yeah. So the one thing I'm trying to find
how the hits are. The key to the hits is what kind of hits are you laying out.
Yeah. So I'm just checking right now here. I'm checking the.
I think it was 54. If you're looking for that number, if I remember correctly.
It was 50. Yeah. So it was the Leafs were definitely out hit 51-24 in the game. But I just wanted to check, and maybe I can look at it here. I'm checking for the third period to see were the Panthers the more aggressive team.
In the third period? I'm trying to think
5,
what it looked like.
6,
Remember what it
7,
looked like?
8, 9, 10, 11. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm counting 13 hits according to NHL.com
By
for the
Florida.
Panthers. Yeah, by Florida in that third period. So 13 of the 51 hits. So I was trying to see, okay, were they more aggressive in the third than they were in the first two periods?
Well, the numbers indicate they weren't.
No, and so that's a curious one for me here. But what I think needs to be thought of here. Yes, they had more hits. I think the Leafs had the quality of hits. Kulikov had that one hit on Holmberg. Okay, sure. But the Leafs got hits on Barkov. Kulikov was also thrown down pretty good. Seth Jones got a pretty decent. I felt like the Leafs stars were not. They did a good job of avoiding punishment from the Panthers.
Except for at the end of the game, Marner couldn't it?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's only it's tough to avoid it when you're not seeing
your back
it
is turned and somebody's back turned.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe next time hit the guy while the play is still going on.
I was looking at the referees going, you know what? Come on.
But when we talk about physicality, we don't always talk about hits, though. Block shots, 24-11 for the Leafs. That's an area there where I still think the Leafs. I think maybe the Florida Panthers were not counting on that. I don't think I think people totally sometimes disregard the Leafs' ability to make sure that they are getting into those shooting lanes and keeping keeping a team like the Panthers off their game in that period by, getting into those, taking the punishment essentially. And I know that there was a big discrepancy when it came to the expected goals. Part of that was because the third period, the Panthers really poured it on.
They sure did. They were behind. You expect that. That's an expectation.
That is an expectation, right? So 5-on-5 in that third period, the Panthers had 18 scoring chances. The Leafs only had 6. So yeah, the Panthers really put on. It was 10-4 in high danger chances as well. So that if you're looking at things that the Leafs need to watch out for, that's probably one of them. You need to make sure that you are not keeping yourself in your own zone as much as the Panthers want you to be. That's something that Florida thrives on, is the ability to keep their opponent in their own zone with the forecheck, grinding down the defense. They got to make quick plays. They got to make sure they're getting themselves up the ice quickly. And you saw it, right? You saw it with the Nylander goal, the turnovers. The Leafs did a good job of making those turnovers lead to scoring chances. Morgan Rielly going for that 2-on-1. Those are the things. Matthew Nyes getting out there on the breakaway.
That was the third period that speaks to what the subject you're talking about. That's when the Leafs were kind of on their heels, but because Florida is pushing so hard, they're leaving themselves open for an opportunity like Nyes had. Yeah.
So I do think that you got to be, if you're the Leafs, you got to be wary of it. Now, you brought it up earlier. Game 2 is going to be the Panthers trying to elicit a response out of Toronto. We know it, right? I've talked about it on the last show, and I brought it up. I'm going to bring it up again. What the Panthers want is for the Leafs to be undisciplined. They want to get, like, you see how Paul Maurice has been talking about this situation with Sam Bennett. You heard also what Craig Berube had to say. Back in my day, yes, we would definitely try to go and get some retribution. For sure. I would probably be the one doing it, he said. At the same time, the one thing you need to be aware of is that the Panthers would thrive on the Leafs being undisciplined. And what are they going to do? They're going to do the little things, take the little jabs here and there, and force the Leafs to respond. You can't. Max Domi
haven't so far. They've done a good job of resisting that kind of retaliation.
The Max Domi one is one of those where he took that penalty on Marshall, and I said it. He went after Holmberg. Domi's got to let that go. The ref got in between Marshall and Holmberg. Let it be. Don't be the second guy in there. They're going to toss you to the box, right? So those are the sort of things you got to be mindful of. Now, Craig Berube did say, you got an opportunity to hit someone, go through them, right? You don't let up. And that's something in the third period I think the Leafs didn't do as much. There were opportunities to make hits, hold guys, they allowed too much time and space with Florida in their own zone in that third period, and that led to the goals, right? The first goal that they scored where there was a deflection, guy was left alone in front of the net. Second goal, Belinskas, yes, great shot. Woll probably should have done a better job trying to save it, but he had all night and day to get down there and get the perfect shot on net because nobody was pressuring him, right? So those are the things that the Leafs are going to have to do in this game to make Florida understand that their chances are not going to come easily.
The Leafs will have to be disciplined, of course. That's 100% correct. If they're ahead and if they're ahead well enough and they want to play defensively and not give anything away, contact is less of a temptation because you don't want to hit yourself out of position. So that's part of the reason why they may not hit it as much if they're in front. But the big thing for the Leafs is to continue doing what they've done, and that is have a defense that threatens to score, which opens up the game and makes some room for the forwards. The defensemen, activating against Florida, we're seeing that really helps with the Leafs. If their defensemen activate without danger, high percentage opportunities. We also know, and I think really the key to this whole series is going to be how Bobby looks normal or average. He looked average against the Leafs. Now, he righted himself, and then the Leafs had the problem where he started really playing really well and playing well enough to give his team enough time to get to one goal difference. So this is the thing the Leafs are going to have to do. They're going to have to make Bobrovsky look normal, look average. That's hard to do. But, hey, listen, we saw Nylander make him look foolish on that first goal. And you can't tell me that's not going to be in Bobrovsky's head. Keep doing that. Keep putting the puck on net. And, hopefully the other thing before we go, I want to make sure we talk about the power play. David, they got to shoot the puck.
Yeah. They got to find a way to get chances quick. Because the longer, Florida were being very aggressive early on when the penalty kill started because they wanted to throw the Leafs off their game. So what I think the Leafs are going to have to do, find a way to move that puck quicker, get that puck moving, because it's going to be hard for the Panthers to keep up. So I do think that, the power play is probably, if there's one thing the Leafs definitely need to do better, it is the power play, because the special teams battle, you can't lose that. You can't be losing that in this series.
Absolutely. Woll has been put in this position. I know we're repeating ourselves a little bit, but Woll has been in this position the past few years. And each time he's been brought in an emergency kind of situation, he's been very effective. I don't see any reason why he can't be this time. It's going to be interesting to see how much traffic and what kind of traffic the Panthers put in front of Woll. I hope, for the Leafs' sake, that the officials will at least give the goaltender some protection, at least the kind of protection he deserves, which is not to be interfered with and not be hit, just indiscriminately. So hopefully those two things it'll allow Woll to play his game. But you know full well what Florida is going to do. They're going to try and take him off his game. By the way, we didn't talk about that shot that hit Stolarz in the head. That was a Gordie Howe shot. There was the old conversation was Gordie Howe and his first shot on net would be he'd shoot head high, and that would get the goaltender thinking. And that shot, I'm not really saying he did it on purpose, but I don't think he did it by accident either. High shot to get his attention.
I think it did ride up a little bit. I think it did deflect a little bit. Yeah, I mean, if you got an open chance, sometimes you just want to get one hard on the goalie, and it'll stun him, right? Make him kind of in a bit of a daze or out of it a little bit. So we'll see if any of those antics come in game 2. Frank, want to thank you for stepping in once again. I appreciate it.
It was fun. My pleasure.
Thank you. And we'll be back once again for a recap of game 2. Hopefully we'll be talking about a Leafs 2-0 series lead, but we'll see. Florida's going to have a big response. We'll see how the Leafs do handle it. Make sure you go and subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you go. Also tell your friends to subscribe on YouTube. Hit the notification. Make sure you're getting those videos when they drop, so you're not missing this great content that we're trying to bring for you Monday to Friday. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.